Quick question for SpaceX employees with stock options. Do you know how your equity is actually taxed? Because this is where a lot of confusion and a lot of costly mistakes tend to happen. There are three main types of taxes that can apply to stock options, and understanding how they work can make a big difference in your outcome. The first is ordinary income tax. This typically shows up with non-qualified stock options or if you sell incentive stock options too early. When you exercise non-quals, the difference between your strike price and the current stock value gets added to your W-2 and is taxed as ordinary income. If you exercise an incentive stock option and sell the ISO before 2 years from the date of grant, plus 1 year from the date of exercise, then you will have a disqualifying disposition, and the spread between the strike price and the current value of the stock that you sold it at gets taxed as ordinary income. ISOs have the ability to be very tax efficient if navigated correctly. The second part of this equation, and often the most misunderstood, is something called alternative minimum tax, or AMT. All right, AMT is essentially a parallel tax system designed to ensure that high earners and those benefiting from certain tax preferences still pay a minimum amount of tax. So instead of using your regular taxable income, the IRS is going to calculate a separate alternative minimum tax figure by adding back certain adjustments and deductions like incentive stock option exercises. If the taxes owed under that AMT calculation is higher than your regular tax bill, you're going to pay the difference on top of that. When you exercise incentive stock options, the difference between your strike price and the current value of the stock can be counted as income for AMT purposes, even if you don't sell the shares. That's where people can run into issues, because you may end up owing taxes without actually receiving any cash. Here's a simple example. Say your strike price is $10 a share and the current fair market value of the stock is $100. You go and exercise 10,000 shares of ISOs. Well, you've just created a $900,000 AMT adjustment, which could potentially cost you $200,000 to $300,000 in taxes being paid before you've sold anything yet. The solution here is spreading exercises across multiple tax years, coordinating with other income events like RSU vests, non-qualified stock option exercises, and bonuses, and then hold long enough to qualify for long-term capital gains. All right, speaking of cap gains, that's the third component here, is the capital gains tax. This comes into play when you actually sell your shares. For incentive stock options, if you hold your shares over a year from the date of exercise, plus hit that 2 year from the date that the shares were granted from you, then your shares should qualify for long-term capital gains. Long-term cap gains are a much lower tax rate than short-term, so this is the goal. For non-qualified stock options, if you hold your shares longer than 1 year from the date of exercise, any gain from there should qualify as long-term capital gains. If you sell sooner, any gain recognized is going to be taxed at a higher short-term tax rate. So timing becomes really important. And navigating your ISOs is where equity compensation gets probably the most complex. And a lot of people hear that ISOs are tax-free at exercise, but that's only partially true. While you may not owe regular income tax at that point, exercising can still trigger that AMT tax depending on the amount of the spread. That's why decisions around when to exercise, how much to exercise, and when to sell all need to be thought through together, because it's not just about the value of the stock. It's about how those decisions show up on your tax return. If you're holding SpaceX equity, this is something worth getting clarity on before making any major moves. Even small adjustments in timing can have a meaningful impact on the overall outcome. If you want to understand how your stock options could be taxed and what a plan might look like for your situation, schedule a free 30-minute Explore meeting with me at babinwealth.com/SpaceX.